The kingdom of Orenfell was built on music. Its towers rose like frozen notes, its rivers sang with enchantment, and its people believed that every living soul carried a song inside them. Those born with no voice or who could not hear were said to have been forgotten by the gods. Leora was one of them, the forgotten. From the day she was born, her world had been silent. Her parents had prayed, begged, and offered gold to healers, but nothing could give her the gift of hearing. As a child, she used to sit by the window and watch others sing spells into the sky, shaping light and wind with their voices. She could only watch, her lips closed, her silence mistaken for weakness. Her mother once told her, "Silence is a curse in this world, my child. But even curses have meaning." Now at 19, Leora had learned to move through life quietly, graceful, unseen, and unheard. She understood people by their eyes, by the way their mouths curved when they spoke, and by the way the air shifted when they laughed. But tonight, that silence would change everything. A thin moon hung over the hall of silver glass, where nobles gathered for an old tradition, the evening of prospects, a night for arranging marriages and alliances. Leora's parents had forced her to come. They hoped that perhaps a kind-hearted lord might take pity and marry her. She wore a soft blue gown and a silver ribbon around her hair. Her hands trembled slightly as she stood at the edge of the grand hall, surrounded by light, sound, and music she could not hear. The laughter of nobles echoed across the marble floors, or so she imagined. A servant led her to a small table lit by crystal lamps. Her date, Lord Marin, a young nobleman from the house of Farrencrest, waited there looking impatient. He had a confident smile and the kind of beauty that drew attention, but his eyes were sharp with judgment. When Leora sat across from him, she smiled shyly and lifted her hand to sign her greeting. He blinked, confused. I cannot hear," she said softly, pointing to her ear and then to her lips. "If you speak slowly, I can read." For a moment he just stared. Then the smile vanished from his face. "You're deaf?" he asked, his tone heavy with disbelief. She nodded. He leaned back in his chair, frowning. "Why would your family send you here? You can't even hear me speak. How could you ever be a wife in Orenfell, where even servants must sing the king's name?" Leora's fingers clenched around her dress. She could not hear his voice, but she could read the cruelty in his lips. Still, she smiled gently, as she always did, because she had learned long ago that gentleness made people less cruel. "I can still understand," she signed carefully, "and I can speak a little," but he was already standing up. "No, this is pointless. I have no interest in pity." And with that he turned and walked away, leaving her alone under the crystal lights. Around her, people whispered. She could feel their laughter like cold wind brushing her skin. Someone snickered behind her. A sharp breath, a tilt of shoulders, all invisible daggers. Her chest tightened. The lights blurred. She wanted to leave, to run, to disappear. But before she could move, a shadow crossed the marble floor. A tall figure dressed in a dark cloak lined with gold. He stopped beside her table. His presence silenced even the laughter she could feel. He removed his hood. Beneath it was a man with dark hair, eyes like a storm, and a scar running down his throat. A mark that looked almost burned into his skin. His clothes were rich but old, like something from another age. He studied her for a long moment. Then he spoke. Leora could not hear the words, but his lips moved slowly, clearly, as if he wanted her to understand. "You'll make a different kind of wife." Leora's breath caught. The words felt strange, kind, yet heavy, like a promise that carried both light and shadow. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes seemed to know her silence, to see through it as if it were glass. She opened her mouth to ask who he was, but he bowed slightly and stepped away. Before he disappeared into the crowd, she noticed a small emblem stitched into the inside of his cloak, a crest she had only seen once before, carved on old ruins and burned into forbidden books, the crown of thorns, the mark of the fallen royal house. Her heart skipped. Those bearing that crest were supposed to be dead, executed, cursed. Later that night, after everyone had gone, Leora stood outside the hall beneath the stars. The cold air wrapped around her, sharp and quiet. She lifted her hands, tracing invisible shapes into the night, signs of her own making, a language no one else knew. In that silence, she remembered his words again and again. You'll make a different kind of wife. What did he mean? Why had he said that to her? A stranger, a girl no one wanted. She felt something strange stirring in her chest. Not fear, not hope, something in between. Like a chord of music she could not hear but could somehow feel thrumming in her bones. As she walked home, the night seemed to move differently. The wind shifted when she passed, whispering through the leaves in patterns she could almost read. The moon glowed brighter, and once, just once, she thought she saw shadows moving with purpose along the rooftops. At her family's manor, her mother met her at the door.
How did it go?
She asked, worry in her eyes. Leora shook her head. He left, she said simply. Her mother sighed. I'm sorry, my love. People do not understand what they fear. You are strong, Leora. Don't forget that. But that night, as she lay awake, she couldn't forget the man with the scarred throat. His voice, though unheard, had left an echo in her silence. The next morning, the kingdom woke to a strange rumor. They said a noble had been found dead near the Hall of Silver Glass, Lord Marin of Farrencrest. His body was untouched, no wound upon him, yet his heart had stopped as if struck by invisible force. Some whispered that a curse had returned to Orenfell. Others said the old bloodline of the fallen kings had risen again. Leora did not believe in rumors. She had learned to doubt words, for they often twisted the truth. But when she stepped outside her window and looked at the horizon, she saw something impossible. A flock of black birds flying in perfect silence, circling above the old ruins of the northern keep. And in her mind, she saw his eyes again. Storm dark, filled with unspoken things. That evening, a carriage stopped before her home. Her mother called out, startled. Leora, someone's asking for you. She walked to the gate, and there he stood. The same man, cloak fluttering in the wind, the scar on his throat catching the fading light. He bowed slightly. His lips moved again, slow and careful. Forgive the intrusion, he said. I owe you a proper introduction. Leora stared at him, her heart pounding. She wanted to speak, but her hands froze. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that could both warm and wound. I am Kale, he said, his lips shaping the name clearly. And I believe we are both cursed by silence. Before she could reply, thunder rolled across the sky. But no sound followed, just light flashing, bright and empty. The air around him shimmered, humming like a note trapped between worlds. Leora stepped back, unsure if she was seeing magic or dream. He reached out very slowly and held out a small pendant shaped like a broken crown. Keep this, he said. It may help you hear what others cannot. Then he turned and left, his cloak trailing like a shadow. Leora stood frozen, clutching the pendant. The air trembled softly in her palm, as if the pendant itself was breathing. For the first time in her life, she felt something like sound, not heard, but felt deep within her soul. The night wind carried no noise, yet somehow she thought she heard the echo of his voice inside her mind. You'll make a different kind of wife. And somewhere, far away, a song that had been silent for years began to stir again. Low, broken, and waiting to be heard. End of part the nom. The next few days passed in strange silence. Leora tried to live as she always had, quietly tending her garden, reading her books, and sketching flowers in her worn notebook. Yet she could not forget the man named Kale. His eyes, his voice she could not hear but somehow felt, haunted her thoughts like a song she had never learned but already knew the rhythm of. Every time she held the pendant he had given her, she felt a faint vibration, like the heartbeat of something ancient. It hummed softly in her hand, especially when she thought of him. One evening, while she sat by her window watching the fading sun, she noticed movement beyond the fields, a shadow among the trees. It was tall, cloaked, and familiar. Her breath caught. Kyle stepped into the moonlight, his dark cloak brushing the grass. He lifted his hand in greeting, a gesture both simple and royal. Leora hesitated, then went outside to meet him. They stood under the pale glow of the moon. The air around them was cool and heavy, filled with that strange stillness she had begun to associate with him. Kale looked down at her, his expression calm but distant. He spoke slowly, carefully, so she could read his lips. Forgive my visit. I had to see you again. Leora frowned slightly, curious. Why? She signed. He paused before answering. Because you are not like the others. You live in silence, yet you see everything. I thought perhaps you could understand what others never did. Her eyes softened. You mean your scar? She asked, pointing gently at his throat. He touched it with his gloved fingers. Yes, he said. This mark is a curse. Leora's heart beat faster. A curse? Cale nodded. His voice was low and careful. Long ago, my family ruled this land. We were the House of Thorns, blessed by song and feared for it. Our voices could command storms, shape winds, move mountains. But power breeds pride. My ancestor used his song to control hearts, to force love where it was not freely given. He looked away, his jaw tight. For that sin, the gods cursed my bloodline. From that day, our voices carried death to the ones we love. Leora's eyes widened. She could hardly believe such a story, but there was something in his gaze that told her it was no lie. Kyle went on. I cannot sing, I cannot speak freely. If I do, someone I care for will die. I have lived in silence for years, hiding my voice from the world, and yet, you are the first person who makes that silence feel bearable. Leora looked down, not knowing what to say. She had always thought her silence was her greatest burden, but now she saw another who suffered the same fate in a different form. She wrote on her notebook quickly, So your curse kills through sound, and mine is to never hear it. Cale read her words and smiled faintly. Perhaps that is why I was drawn to you. Over the next few days, Kyle visited her often. He came at dusk, always cloaked, always quiet. Sometimes he brought her old books about forgotten songs or stories about the gods. Other times they simply sat together. She reading his lips, he learning her signs. They began to speak without words. A glance, a gesture, the way he tilted his head or the way she smiled. It was a language of its own. One afternoon, while they walked near the old fountain behind her house, Kyle told her something that changed everything. My curse is growing stronger, he said. Soon I will lose even the small control I have. There are people who want to use it. Those who believe the power of the thorns can be reborn. I must return to the capital and take back my name before they destroy what remains of this land. He looked at her seriously. I need someone who can stand beside me, not out of duty but out of choice. Leora blinked in surprise. Why me? Because, he said softly, you are the only one who can survive my voice. You are untouched by the power that kills others. Her heart trembled. You want me to go with you? She signed slowly. Yes, he replied, but it will be dangerous. My enemies are everywhere and my own blood wants me dead. Still, I cannot do this alone. Leora hesitated. All her life, people had pitied her. No one had ever needed her. She had always been the one left behind, unseen and unheard. And now this man, a cursed prince, was asking her to walk beside him. Her fingers trembled as she wrote on her notebook. If I come, I want to choose it myself. Not because you pity me, Kyle smiled. Then choose. Leora looked up at the darkening sky, at the first stars flickering like tiny fires. She took a deep breath and nodded. I'll go. That night they left under the cover of fog. Kyle guided her through the forest paths, his cloak blending with the shadows. The pendant around her neck pulsed gently, lighting their way like a dim lantern. They reached an old road leading toward the city of Alarion, where the royal court still ruled. It had been years since Kyle had set foot there, years since his family had fallen. As they traveled, Kyle told her more about the curse and the rebellion that had taken his throne. His voice stayed quiet, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. The current king, Lord Avaris, was once my father's advisor, he said. When the curse struck our house, he took advantage of it. He blamed our blood for every tragedy that followed. The people believed him. My family was executed. All except me. Leora could see the pain in his eyes. How did you survive? She signed. I was saved by the Oracle of Ashenvale, he said. She told me that one day I would find the key to ending the curse. I think she meant you, Leora froze. Me? Yes, he said, smiling faintly. Your silence balances my voice. You are the other half of the curse, the stillness that can tame it. She didn't know what to say. It sounded impossible, yet everything about him already felt impossible. When they reached the outskirts of Alarion, the city shimmered like silver beneath the moon. Music echoed faintly. Though Leora could not hear it, she could feel it in her chest like a distant drumbeat. Cale's expression hardened. We'll go to the palace tomorrow, he said. For now, rest. They found shelter in an old inn on the edge of the city. The keeper gave them a small room, and Kale stood guard by the window, watching the streets below. Leora lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Her heart was restless. She had left everything behind, her family, her quiet life, for a man she barely knew. And yet something in her told her she had made the right choice. When she looked at him, she didn't see a prince or a cursed man. She saw someone who understood the emptiness she had carried her whole life. Near midnight, a loud crash shook the inn. Leora sat up, startled. Kale's hand went instantly to his sword. Through the window she saw torches, soldiers approaching, wearing the sigil of the current king. "They've found us," Kale said. He turned to her. "Stay behind me." The door burst open. 3 armored men rushed in. Kale moved swiftly, silent as a shadow. He fought with the precision of a trained warrior. But one of the soldiers swung a blade toward Leora. She screamed. No sound came, but her fear burned bright in her eyes. Kale shouted her name, a sound he had sworn never to speak. His voice, sharp and raw, cut through the air. The soldier froze, his eyes wide, and fell lifeless to the ground. The other 2 ran, terrified. Kale stood still, breathing hard. The room was quiet except for the faint hum in the air. Leora stared at him in shock. She had felt his voice like thunder beneath her skin, like the air itself had trembled. He looked at her, guilt in his eyes. "You see now," he said softly. "This is my curse." Leora stepped forward, her hand shaking, and touched his scar gently. "Your voice is not evil," she signed. "It only hurts when it is filled with fear." Kyle's expression softened, as if her words had touched something deep inside him. Outside, the torches of the soldiers flickered and faded. The night grew quiet again. Kale turned toward the window, his voice a whisper she could barely read. "They will come again. We must reach the palace before dawn." Leora nodded. As they left the inn, she looked once more at the stars above. The world felt heavier now, filled with danger and destiny. But her heart was no longer afraid. For the first time, she didn't feel broken. She felt chosen. And as they walked into the shadows of the sleeping city, she could almost feel a melody in her chest, faint, unfinished, waiting for its next verse. End of part 2.